I feel like in the world of finance, because there are crazy things like derivatives and options trading, and now we have this whole other world of cryptocurrency, that it can become overwhelming pretty quickly. But what I'm here to tell you is once you understand the foundational pieces, then 80% of what you think you need to know after that is actually not for you, especially as we start to answer some of the questions today. It's going to help people really understand, like, what do you focus on? What do you pay attention to? And what's no longer for you? And then all of a sudden you free up space. You don't have as much stress. You don't feel overwhelmed. You don't feel like you have to trust someone and hand your money over. You can start to trust yourself because you have the basic foundation. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. Are you wondering what to do with your savings? Have you been setting money aside but not sure what to do next? How do you start? What are the best ways to protect your cash and yet find ways to grow it? If you're looking to become a better investor, this is the Ask the Money Nerds session for you. Stoba, what's up?
Hey, I thought we could try something new today.
All right.
And we'll do it for the next couple of episodes. We'll see what people's response is. But since this is a show about understanding finances on a deeper level, I thought we could do a word of the day and help people understand some of the financial words that they may.
It's about understanding finances at a level where you can start really enjoying your life and create a much better life because money's not in the way and it becomes more of an ally rather than a foe.
Yes,
right?
I like that. Well said. Well said. So I just figured I have two words actually. So word of the day times two because they go hand in hand, but annual percentage rate, APR. Okay. And then we have interest rate. So I'm going to delineate between the two, but I'll just give you the definition that I have. And then if you want to add something to it, you can. So annual percentage rate, APR, is the yearly cost of a loan, including all interest and fees. The total amount of interest paid is based upon the amount of the original loan, and it represents the actual cost of borrowing.
Right.
Good. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then interest rate represents the cost of borrowing money. So I think one of the things when we're building our financial literacy, increasing our competence. So when we walk into a bank to get a loan or we're applying for a credit card, we really understand what is being outlined in the contract. I think that's really good. So we have more power over our money and our situation. So is there anything you want to add to those?
Yeah. So let's say that you have a life insurance policy and you can either pay monthly or annually. Mm-hmm. When you pay annually, you're like, oh, cool. That's a 3% discount.
Yeah.
But it's actually a little bit more than that because you're making payments every single month. Mm-hmm. Right. And the balance should be going down each month. So you should only be paying interest on what's left over.
Yeah.
But because it's charged on the whole amount, essentially, this is kind of the delineation between APR and interest rate. So it's actually a bigger impact and savings to pay up front. But there's also opportunity cost.
Yes.
What else could you do with that money? What rate of return would you get? So as we start to understand finance, like cost of money is such a huge concept, which is what's your highest cost to borrow? Or what's your best sustainable rate of return? And that's your cost of money because we're always paying interest, whether you pay cash and forfeit the right to earn it.
Yeah. When I understood this, it changed my life. It really did. It's a simple concept, but it really has profound impacts on our finances.
I feel like in the world of finance, because there are crazy things like derivatives and options trading, and now we have this whole other world of cryptocurrency, that it can become overwhelming pretty quickly. But what I'm here to tell you is once you understand the foundational pieces, then 80% of what you think you need to know after that is actually not for you, especially as we start to answer some of the questions today. It's going to help people really understand, like, what do you focus on? What do you pay attention to? And what's no longer for you? And then all of a sudden you free up space. You don't have as much stress. You don't feel overwhelmed. You don't feel like you have to trust someone and hand your money over. You can start to trust yourself because you have the basic foundation. So that's where I want to take them.
Yes. Okay. So let's get into Palumi's question. This person says, I recently found your channel and I'm enjoying your content. I'm 24 years old, a recent graduate, and I just started my second job out of school. The first job was at the beginning of the year and I got laid off after 4 months because of COVID. During the down times when I didn't have a job, I started researching how I could invest the little savings I had acquired from the first job. Everything is still sitting in my account, and I'm afraid that now that I have a new job, I will relax and just keep saving without growing my money. What would your advice be to a recent graduate who has little savings, the advice in terms of investing, starting a business, and just life principles?
So the first thing is, I think making more money is the first objective. So how do you contribute to the bottom line of the organization that you're at? How do you get bonuses? How do you create upside potential? And if you can figure that out, there's a lot more possibility for you. Second is really dialing in how to keep more of what you make. So paying less in interest, paying less in insurance costs without losing coverage, or, you know, making sure that you don't have hidden fees or commissions or those kind of things. And then really investing in yourself as far as your skill sets, as far as your main competencies that make the biggest difference in the world, which are going to relate to that first thing of making more money, and then focus on becoming a better investor. But to be a better investor, it's really about focus more than it is diversification. Most people just kind of get to the point where like, well, I don't really know how to invest, so I just need to find an advisor. I'm just going to hand my money over to them. I'm going to save it every single month because I'm in it for the long haul. And people just invest early, often, and always. And what they end up finding out is the results aren't quite what they anticipated. Even if the average return is a certain amount, by the time they account for volatility and fees, and life happens along the way that you might need access to it. Or unfortunately, some people are investing, but then they have really high interest rates. And so they're actually moving backwards to a certain degree because their interest rates are higher than their investments. So what I really think is important is that we figure out how to focus instead of diversify. Diversification is an amazing tool when you have an extraordinary amount of wealth and more than you can invest in one sector or one type of investment. That doesn't mean that we only have one investment our whole life, and if that one thing goes wrong, we lose everything. We've seen that happen with people that work for a company and they buy stock in that company, and that isn't intelligent either, because what it does is it creates way too much exposure. But what I mean by focus over diversification comes down to investor DNA. So that is, what are your core values? Values are like the script of our lives of what we're going to pay the most attention to because they're important. Then, what are your competencies? Where do you have intelligence and insight and strategy and know-how and willingness to learn? You know, that's going to be key because we all have different abilities and different insights. And so instead of going and investing in things you don't know or understand, which can create a lot of risk and a lot of hype can kind of sway people that way, start to become more knowledgeable. And then it's really about, what are your core drivers? What will you pay attention to? What are you really truly interested in? Because it's going to help drive you further to go, I'm really going to focus on this. And then that's where we bring in the focus. Okay, so you might have a handful of investments. They might be related to a certain degree, but a little bit different. A lot of people think they're diversified still, but what happens is they're in a mutual fund and then a second mutual fund, and they just hold a lot of the same stocks. And even though they might have a bunch of different stocks, they're in stocks, which are going to be, you know, when economies happen certain ways and things go on, stocks can all get impacted very similarly. So I don't really see that as a diversification strategy. It's a diversification strategy. And when we prematurely diversify before we understand what we're invested in or what makes the most sense to us, it creates problems. So for me, I think there's a focus of one of three assets for people moving forward, but it does require a higher degree of involvement up front to create a better income stream over time. And one is real estate, which I don't prefer. I don't like dealing with property management and maintenance and banks and attorneys. It's just like, it's all the stuff that's not really enjoyable, and spreadsheets. The second thing would be small businesses. That's a little bit more something that I'm interested in, right? Especially if it can complement everything I'm doing at Wealth Factory. The third thing would be intellectual property. That's where we really put all of our eggs in that basket, right? And, you know, I'm creating on a consistent basis. It's very engaging and enjoyable and profitable. So it's almost like picking one of those three lanes. And then even in that, there's multiple facets and factors. Real estate could be fix and flip. It could be, you know, renting on residential real estate or commercial real estate, or it could be fractionalized ownership or doing seller financing or auctions, or, I mean, there's just so many different options within that. And as we know, there's so many different businesses and so many different sectors. So what is it that really aligns with your investor DNA? Now, some people say, well, I just don't really have time for that. And for those people, I mean, I'm kind of a look at cashflowbanking.com, and you're never going to hit home runs, but at least you know that you've protected your money and set it aside. If you're not willing to spend the time, do not allocate the money and watch things go bad and then be frustrated about it, because it's just not what it's been purported to be.
So can I go back to one of the things that you said at the very beginning of the conversation about suggesting, hey, talk with your company and see how you can be entrepreneurial and how you can provide greater value. You know, with the companies that you own, that's a really easy conversation.
We're small, and that, you know, people have direct access to the people that are in charge, and you know.
Yeah. And there's space for creativity and bringing your own skill sets to the table. Now, if someone works for a larger corporation, or maybe they are somewhere in between
and
the
there
two.
are certain jobs that'd be a little bit hard to create upside potential. Like
Right.
you don't want to necessarily create upside potential in some service organizations that might be, you know, like more about like treating crisis or something like that. So
do you have any suggestions on like how an employee could initiate those conversations? Like if they see that there is a possibility of having upside potential, or that their employer is open to those kinds of conversations, how would you suggest this person or others listening could start that conversation?
Well, you and I, like, I've made a post one day and we got 400 to 500 comments on this post, which I never post on Facebook. I was like, wow, there's a lot of interest for people to have a curriculum around money, business, emotional IQ, and all the things that we don't really learn in school.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was like, I just don't have the capacity for it. Even though I'm interested, it's not really what my main initiatives are. But you have a background in teaching. And so we just started this conversation about what if you were to lead it, help build it. I'm involved in it, but I'm not taking charge of it. There could be some upside potential for you. And so that was a perfect type of conversation. Yes, we're a smaller organization, but bigger organizations have more to gain in a lot of ways. Maybe there's massive inefficiency and someone can identify that inefficiency and improve it and get a small percentage. And so the question is, who is it that can actually make those decisions, or take it to the person that make the decisions that you could say, hey, I don't want to be an owner. Owners, obviously, they have a lot of downside risk and they take on a lot of burden. But I would love upside potential as I contribute to the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so it begins with whoever you know best at the organization, even if they're not the one in charge, to initiate that conversation. And then if that organization's not interested, well, you either move on or move up. That's the thing. So you can't just stay trapped and wish things are different and then blame them and get frustrated and angry. That's not healthy. You've got to look for a different organization. And as you invest in yourself, as you become more irreplaceable because you're really honing in your skills, you're adding way more value than you take. Well, there's always room for those type of people in organizations. So
yeah. I'm thinking back to a little segment that you do in our workshops when we were doing them in person, where you have every participant say, like, you know, what's your goal? What does this mean to you? How does this change your day to day? And that framework of a conversation might be helpful as someone's entering into this type of conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is what it means to me as, you know, a valued employee, and this is how it changes the company or adds value to what we're already doing and expands the vision and the work that is being done here. So,
well, I don't know if you're familiar with my 5-step relationship transformation conversation.
I don't know if I remember the details of it.
It's really, really helpful for difficult conversations. And some people, this might be concerning. So, so the 5 steps are: number 1, when you approach someone for a tough conversation, you always acknowledge the asset that they are.
Yeah.
Like, what can you authentically appreciate about them? Number 2, you address any liabilities that you've brought to the table. Like, sorry, I didn't bring this to you earlier. This has been something that's been on my mind that I've been afraid to approach, but you actually take responsibility for the things that made it, is why you're having the conversation. And the third is you actually lay out the situation at hand. I would love to get paid based upon upside potential. And then whatever it is, and then you just say, so what would you do if you're in my shoes? And let them help co-create the solution for you.
Yeah.
I would talk to this person, or you're in the right place right now. And then step 4 is, if you've come up with solutions, reiterate those solutions and create the plan of what to move forward with. And number 5 is, if things were a little bit, whether they were great or even uneasy, 24 to 48 hours later, you get back in a meeting or on a phone call and say, hey, I brought up a pretty important conversation the other day. Might have caught you by surprise. Is there anything that came up for you? And you just listen. So if there's anything you need to go back over, you kind of get it all out there.
Yeah.
But you don't just leave it lingering. So that's kind of, and I do that for tough conversations that are like, this is a firing, or this is a situation where we are not seeing eye to eye, or it's creating issues. So I mean, I think that part of this homeschooling curriculum that you and I are talking about is learning how to speak, learning how to write, and learning how to communicate, especially the tough conversations, because that's how we get a lot further in life,
Right.
rather than resentment and frustration and complaining from afar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a big stepping stone in being able to communicate is being able to express our wants and our needs and even our setbacks in a way that is effective.
Right. So back to the question at hand, I would be looking for cash flowing type of investments. What are the cash flowing types of investments that are out there? and especially ones that you could learn about or know about. And it's fine to utilize experts, but make sure you're utilizing them, not relying on them. When we rely, there's no personal responsibility. There's no accountability. There's just blame. And also, we get involved in things without enough information because we're just so-called trusting the experts. But they may be more salespeople than they are actual experts. And they may be paid on a transaction, which means it's always a good time to do the transaction, hard for them to talk you out of paying them money or commission. So we got to be a little bit careful about that. And this is something that it's okay to take a little bit of time with.
Yes.
We don't have to rush in and allocate the money, because I like the capitalization theory of when you have cash and opportunities come, you can capitalize, right? Instead of always investing, it goes down, you start getting frustrated, you get concerned, but then the opportunities are coming and you don't have the cash for it because you'd have to cash out and you're worried about that loss, or maybe it's in a retirement plan. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity coming up, and we still have a little bit of time at the time of this recording.
Yes.
So don't rush, be intelligent about it. And if you're not going to put a lot of attention at cashflowbanking.com. Now, if you want to know more about how to make more money and keep more money, budgetingsucks.com, because we're giving what we can on the video. There's limited time. If you want to read more, it's a very small investment. I think you get the audiobook and the book for like $7 or something like that. But I mean, I worked on that for years. I think it's an awesome book that we definitely need to get out there. So, yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts? Did you have top 3 places where wealth will be?
Yeah, that was really real estate, small businesses, and then intellectual property. So,
well, that's a wrap for this question.
Want to continue the path to be a better investor? Make sure that you're not losing money and taking too much risk? Well, click here and learn about strengths vesting.